Hello and welcome to the Randomly Generated History Club, where three non-historians pick a year at random and try to learn things about it. I'm Ant, and I'm here with my two friends, Will and Anna. Salut.
Ooh, hello.
You should have chosen another language.
I know. Salve.
So, this week we're talking about the year 61. Yeah.
Nice.
I'd like each of us to give our three-word preview, please. Anna.
Kiss, kick, kill.
Ooh. Good.
I've just activated my secret army.
Will.
Romani ite domum.
Oh God, here he goes again.
Here we go. I don't know what that means. I can't even say it. And mine is soggy Welsh warfare.
Nice. Very good. Also, so I think maybe some of us are going to talk about Rome.
Yeah.
I was just in Rome.
Oh.
I'm going to tell you guys, hot take, it's great.
Really?
Hidden gem.
Yeah, it's so hidden.
Yeah, people should
Epicenter
go.
of civilization.
And this is in the Mediterranean
Yeah.
region?
It's in the country that looks like a boot. And it's just somewhere in the middle there.
Bootland.
Bootlandia.
Yeah.
What was your favorite thing about Italy? And what was the least favorite thing about Italy?
My favorite thing about Italy was knowing that we were doing the year 61 on our history podcast.
Did you speak to anyone that was alive then? Any primary...
So many people. I paid extra for a tour to talk to the ancients. It was worth it. I am talking about Rome proper and about the Emperor Nero, but more importantly about his wife and his mother and some of the hot goss around his life. Because Nero is, of course, one of the most fascinating Roman emperors, and we haven't really talked about him at all yet, I don't think. So I'm going to give you the briefest possible summary, because there are so many podcasts that can do an in-depth Nero episode better than we can. But don't listen to them. You should only listen to this show. Nero is the fifth Roman emperor, ruling from the year 54 until 68. He was the adopted son of Claudius, and it's important to know that he was adopted. But he was descended from Augustus through his mother. And that was also politically very important. And he has a reputation for being totally debauched and tyrannical and possibly mad. Some Christians believed that he was the Antichrist.
Oh.
So that's a thing. On the other hand, the common people seem to love him for a while. So there's that. But today I want to talk about his personal life, because here on the Randomly Generated History Club, we love hot goss.
Oh, yeah.
The hottest, the
This is
spiciest
like Below
goss.
Deck combined with Love Island.
Oh, yeah. And combined with like Kill Bill, because it's incredibly violent. Spoiler alert. So when he was 16, Nero married his stepsister, Claudia Octavia. And a few years after that, his stepfather, the Emperor Claudius, dies. Of course, lots of historians claim that Claudius was poisoned by Claudius's wife, Nero's mother, Agrippina. Claudius had a natural son whose name was Britannicus.
Good name.
But for some reason, he had favored Nero and kind of adopted Nero as his heir. But there were some indications that maybe he was going back on that and he was going to start favoring Britannicus over Nero. And so Agrippina wanted to make sure that that didn't happen. And she wanted to make sure that Nero, her son, was in charge. So she poisoned Claudius. And she had also poisoned several of her other enemies. So this is a woman who knows her way around a toxic mushroom. Which is what I assume it will say on my gravestone. But regardless of whether or not she did it, she definitely maneuvered to smooth the passage for Nero's ascent to the throne. She installed loyal friends in the Praetorian Guard. She kind of replaced some of his tutors with more favorable people. So we've got ourselves a hungry mother who is trying to rule Rome through her son and will stop at nothing to maintain her grip on power. We love this kind of person, except also she's a murderer, so I won't be...
Well, I mean, who isn't
Who
in
isn't?
history?
Who hasn't poisoned their husband?
They're going to catch you, Anna, by the way. They will catch up with you.
They won't. It's untraceable.
I think when people look back, there'll be so many dots they'll feel they should have joined.
Yeah.
She's dropping so many hints.
I know, but
they
they won't connect them because that would mean listening to all of the episodes of the podcast.
Which no one has done.
Yeah. So as Nero gets older, he starts to move against Agrippina. He sort of sees that she's maneuvering him and he doesn't like it. So he removes her loyalists. He becomes more emancipated from her. He eventually banishes her from the palace. And then in the year 59, he kills her.
Oh, no.
Oops. And historians don't all agree why he did it or how he did it. And there's really, really interesting stories about the methods that he may or may not have used, including inventing a collapsible boat. But we won't get into that.
Collapsible boat? Yeah. Is that just a bad boat?
Yeah, well, like an intentionally bad boat that was designed to
every boat that
sink.
sinks is a collapsible boat.
Exactly. But in order to explore what may or may not have happened and why he may or may not have killed her, we need to meet the other person in today's story. Her name is Poppaea Sabina. She was born in Pompeii in the year 30. One quick side note is that excavations near Pompeii turned up some legal documents that described her as the owner of a tile work business in the area. We love a female entrepreneur. We love a tile layer. And she was allegedly very, very beautiful, which helps when you're going to get up to what she gets up to.
Lots of tiling?
Lots of tiling.
Only hot tilers will
she
work
lays a lot of tile.
God.
Her first marriage, unrelatedly, is to a man with the excellent name Rufius Crispinus.
Oh, yes. Oh, the names.
Roofy.
You don't see
Hard
Rufius.
roof.
Yeah.
Not only did she lay tile, she laid roof.
Tile.
Oh, God.
Okay. This is a serious topic. This is Rome, the cradle of civilization.
Oh, sorry.
Other than Norwich.
Africa was the cradle of civilization.
So she's married to Rufius Crispinus, who had been the leader of the Praetorian Guard until he was removed by Agrippina and then executed by Nero. Interesting. Poppaea and Rufius had a son who was also named Rufius Crispinus, because why would you not? So remember that, little fellow. Poppaea's second marriage was to Otho, who was besties with Nero. And lots of people suspect that she did this explicitly to get close to Nero, and it worked. She became Nero's mistress, later divorced Otho, and turned all her focus onto Nero. But the joke's on her because Otho would later become emperor as well.
Oh,
so she should have just stuck it out.
All the wrong horses
Yeah, she
here.
really is. She's bad at horsebacking.
Yeah.
So that one I didn't even intend to be. I'm in her mind. All right. So Poppaea is Nero's mistress, but Nero is still married to Claudia Octavia. This is where things get spicy. Agrippina is murdered in 59, and a prevailing theory for why Nero did it is because Poppaea told him to. She needed to get Agrippina out of the way. However, Poppaea and Nero didn't get married until 62. So it's sort of like you're going to kill his mother or orchestrate the killing of his mother, and then like 3 more years pass before you can see through. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some historians don't buy it. They think there's this whole narrative around Poppaea that she's controlling, and she is, but was she involved in Agrippina's death? Who knows?
If she was a man, she'd just be called like ambitious.
Exactly.
You know,
She'd just be called like a man. But Poppaea definitely did scheme to get Claudia Octavia out of the picture. So Octavia and Nero had never had any children. So when Poppaea gets pregnant in the year 62, which is just 1 year after the year in question, Nero uses this as an excuse to divorce Octavia, claiming Octavia is barren, and 12 days later he marries Poppaea. The people who had been such a fan of his are not in favor of this. They're very much Team Octavia, and they think that what he's done is horrible. So instead of sort of like apologizing to them, he concocts this elaborate story about how Octavia was actually cheating on him and she's an adulteress, and this elaborate ruse that the people totally don't buy. They see what's happening. He got his mistress pregnant and he wants to divorce his wife. But anyway, Nero banishes Octavia, he exiles her to an island, and then ultimately has her executed. and has her head cut off and brought back to Poppaea.
Wow.
So just to clarify, so he sends her to an island.
Yeah.
He then has her executed on the island.
Yeah.
And then he has someone bring the head back.
Yes. It's very inefficient.
So
logistically
inefficient.
challenging.
So logistically challenging. Could have just done it in the house.
Yeah, and then send the
Less
body to the
muss,
island.
less fuss.
Yeah.
Listen, he's not great at decisions. He's made some real bad ones.
I can tell that.
So Nero and Poppaea, having killed everyone who ever even looked at them funny, enjoy a few years of wedded bliss.
That's nice.
Yeah. But just when you think it's going to be a happy ending, Poppaea dies. I know what you're thinking. Nero did it.
Yeah, he must have done.
And you're probably right. Maybe. The popular story, which with the big caveat that this was written by several vehemently anti-Nero historians, is that in the summer of 65, Poppaea is pregnant again, and she and Nero have this massive row because he's spending too much time at the racetrack, which I love. So in a fit of rage, he kicks her in the belly, killing her and the unborn child,
God.
which is awful and grim, which is, and also seems like if they were happy together, that's one hell of a fit of rage. So other historians say that it's much more likely that she just died in childbirth.
Yeah.
Especially because a few, I don't know, centuries later, they unearthed a fragment of papyrus that had a Greek poem relating a very sweet and loving speech Poppaea made to Nero before she ascends to heaven on a chariot driven by Aphrodite.
Oh,
Which is
wow.
a much nicer...
Yeah. Did he put money on that chariot at the races as well?
Yeah, exactly.
He's not the most.
He put all his ducats on that chariot. Is that the currency? Anyway, just to close this out, what's definitely true is that Nero goes into deep, deep mourning after Poppaea's death. He gives her a state funeral. He promotes her to godhood. He embalms her and supposedly burned a year's worth of incense at her funeral. Sorry, a year's worth of the incense production of Arabia.
Oh, right, okay. Because
So,
like a year's worth of incense for me is like one stick.
It's like one, maybe two sticks. Yeah, totally. Yeah, my bad. A year's worth of the entire production of incense of Arabia, which to me is too much.
Yeah,
That's a smell that's going
I'm
to
not an incense man.
stick in your nostrils.
I'm not a fan of incense.
Yeah,
in
I
general.
agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
I'm more
Well-
of a myrrh kind of guy. You know.
And Will goes for the gold.
I like a good honest incense.
Yeah.
Like one that's being like a straight talking, really frank incense.
Boo.
That was very good. That was very good.
And two last little facts here, because I want people to know all the information about Nero until we talk about him at a later point. At some time after Poppaea's death, he takes her son, Rufrius, remember him, on a fishing trip.
Yep.
Which is nice, little stepdad, stepson. But
Kills him.
drowns him. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Which seems at odds with the deep mourning over his mother, but I don't know.
Why do people keep falling for it?
I don't know. Like, stay away from this guy.
Yeah.
And then in just one final and totally bizarre and kind of touching and kind of strange postscript, in the year 67, Nero orders a young freedman named Sporus
Morgan.
to be... a young freedman
Morgan
named
Freeman.
Morgan to be castrated, and then he marries him because apparently this young man bore an uncanny resemblance to Poppaea.
Right.
Sorry, what?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
marries
Except
him,
for the balls.
except for the castration.
They had to go.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Wow.
Calls him Sporus, this young man, calls him Poppaea, marries him.
Wow.
God.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is like we've just scratched the surface of Nero
you haven't-
and Agrippina and everything.
You
It's
haven't once
fascinating
talked about
stuff.
his fiddle playing.
I know. I had to skip all of his fiddle playing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that is the story about Rome. And you can trust me because I've been there.
Today, I am going to be talking about a piece of history I never knew even existed. Right? I didn't know a single thing about this.
Doesn't really narrow it down.
It narrows it down completely to the years minus 1,000 to plus 2,000. But I'm going to be talking about a group of wise people. They're much maligned and misunderstood and misrepresented even to this day. They are, of course, my new favorite group, the Welsh.
Okay, there's such a build-up and I was getting so nervous. Okay, the Welsh.
Specifically, though, the Celtic Welsh, and specifically the Celtic Welsh Druids.
Ooh.
Nice.
So, these are the Druids that were ensconced and lived in Anglesey, or in, it was called Mona at the time,
Yes.
which is currently still the Welsh word for it is Mon. And that comes from a Welsh word for modron, we think. Modron, M-O-D-R-O-N, which is an ancient Welsh goddess. This mother, matriarch goddess, and one of the Celtics worship. And it's, this modern character is the source of probably many other sort of other myths of matron goddesses, including Morgan Le Fay of Arthurian legend.
Yeah.
So they stole it from the Welsh, as the English stole so many things from the Welsh.
Yeah.
That's another story. But anyway, Druids, who were they? What were they? What do they look like? Where do they come from? No one really knows. Actually, is
that true?
Yeah, it's pretty
I
true.
feel like they're such a thing.
Yeah,
Wow.
they are such a thing, but there's been so much misremembering, mistelling. But what we do know...
And that's not going to be helped by today's podcast.
Today we're going to misremember together, everybody. But they were a member of a sort of high-ranking class in ancient Celtic cultures. They were religious leaders. They were legal authorities. They were sort of these conduits to the gods. They were, lore keepers and medical professionals and, political advisors and stuff. So they had this kind of
jacks of all trades.
Yeah, multifaceted roles. We kind of think, and the reason why we think is there's actually no written account of what they did or what they studied or what they knew. It's all from secondhand accounts of other civilizations coming into contact with them. Allegedly, writing was explicitly banned in their religion. So they had Celtic runes and stuff for writing other things, but they could not talk about Druids or their beliefs, etc. It was explicitly banned.
That's so funny that they were the lore keepers and the legal scholars, and both of those things you would imagine
Well, you
required
just get away with
writing.
whatever you want. Yeah, you can just say what you want, right? You just make it up on the spot.
I don't know. Last week that guy said, "Well, it's not written down." So
All this myth that we're going to go into about the communing and they're sacrificing and they're taking all these psychedelic substances and stuff. So a society of drugged up mystics that didn't read or write, which is that's my niche. I feel I would be a great mystic. I would fit right in.
that's a world that you want to live in today, I think.
I think so too.
I feel like you would confidently pronounce all sorts of stuff.
I would be able to pronounce so. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So they're all Celts of the higher up types, and they had various lores and stories and sort of ceremonies. And it was said in some accounts that it took up to 20 years to study to complete your druid apprenticeship and be an official druid. And they're held in extremely high regard. It was said that they were able to negotiate between warring factions and just stand between two armies and decree that this war is finished, or
I've tried that.
more often,
It did not go well for me.
more often I think they just spur them on to kill the other guys, really. But there's not a single verse or a single line of any Celtic, Druidic ceremony, lore, tale, story has survived to this day.
That is crazy.
It is crazy. Even in translations, there's nothing, and there's nothing verifiable. There's a bunch of stuff came up later that the Druidic myth was reinvented and popularized in the 1800s as well. But there's loads of misconceptions. But it was probable that they were very secretive about their worship and that kind of stuff, and that sort of makes sense that they don't survive. Anyway, this fascinating group were on the island of Mon in Wales, Anglesey, and Rome had been sweeping through Britannia and just kind of keeping the plucky Brits down and making sure they weren't going to stray too far from the light of civilization that is the epicenter of Rome. Which
Nero, the pinnacle of civilization.
Oh yeah, exactly. And the Celts and the Druids in particular were just haranguing and harassing these Romans in Britain, where they would launch sort of these campaigns against them and jump them on the various logistical runs and stuff and sort of just harass them and steal their stuff. And so
annoying.
Yeah, it's so
Cattle rustlers.
they were based on that. And enough was enough. And in 61 AD, the sort of governor or one of the provisional governors in Britain, Suetonius Polonius, decided enough was enough and decided to teach the Druids, this pesky Druids, a bit of a lesson. And so...
well, he's going to have to apprentice for 20 years before he can teach them a lesson.
Yeah, true, they're going to teach him a few things. The problem was they were sort of in Anglesey, which was... It's effectively an island. I mean, it is an island.
Agreed.
Yeah, how can something be effectively an island?
So it did mean then that because it's an island, the Romans had to fight the most ancient and unforgiving enemy of all, which is
The tides.
The tides.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. The tides. The tides were a problem. All these troops, they're all basically land-born. Very few of them were,
Fish.
Very few fish.
Very few of them were fish-born.
And so they had to get across the water, and they had to time the tides. And how do you get like a mass troops across the tides in time so that the last people going across weren't going to get swept away?
I mean, the concept of a boat was foreign.
No, they did have boats, and as we
Okay.
know, collapsible boats now. But what they did also invent another type of boat, a flat-bottom boat, which is, never features in rap songs.
Flat-bottom boat is my favorite Queen song.
Yeah. So these infantry got to go in these beautifully handcrafted, Italian wood flat-bottom boats, whereas the cavalry had to just swim with their horses.
Oh, sorry. This is the Romans who are
Romans.
having problems
the
with the
Romans,
tides.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The Druids aren't leaving
No, they
Anglesey
control the
to
tides,
go.
so they're fine. It's just very cadenced. So the crafty Druids controlling the tides on one side, the Romans going across, swimming with their horse. Like, cavalry are the posh ones, right? They're like the elite troops, and then suddenly they're having to like swim.
Horses are incredible swimmers.
Yeah, but like I'm assuming
that's true.
The posh people on the back of them less so.
Yeah, I could feel your skepticism from here.
How many times have you swam across the Welsh rivers?
I can't comment on that under advice of counsel.
Anyway, so they get across, but they are absolutely terrified by what they see. And this is really interesting because arrayed in front of them are this raving mass horde of Celts, of Druids, of women, of children. And they were shocked to see these so-called crazed women with their black hair and just screaming and raving up and down the lines of these Celts. And the Druids were casting spells at them, so their hands outstretched to the heavens and casting incantations and stuff.
Is this true, or are you
This
romanticizing
is true.
it?
This is this is actually according to the record.
Cool.
So yeah. So
That would be pretty terrifying.
Sorry, just to clarify, your source here is, quote, the record.
Will, it's the record. It's fine.
Sorry, I won't quibble any further.
no. This was written down by a chap who is very, very famous.
Recordius.
No, Recordius Maximus. No, Tacitus.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah,
Tacitus.
he's legit.
Recordius Maximus and Tacitus have foretold this.
Good objective source.
Good objectives to back to the. So Tacitus obviously not objective, but it is interesting because this is the only record that we have where it was said that the Roman massed army was actually terrified of what they saw. So oftentimes they're just depicted as this mechanical, almost just conquesting entity, whereas this is very human, that they're actually terrified. And they've encountered hordes of sort of these barbaric tribes, or whatever you want to call them, these mass militia.
They'd never seen women before.
But they actually, that was part of it.
Yeah.
And so like the generals and the officers had to spur them on and say, hey, like, come on, lads. I mean, come on. They were spurred on pretty well, and what ensued was kind of just mass carnage. The spells didn't work. And they just swept through these hordes and just like nearly eradicated them. And then they went on and they went throughout the island, and they just destroyed all the shrines because they were just a bit superstitious. What if this is a source?
Yeah.
And they just killed anyone they could find. Like anyone they could find, they were like, yep, they're dying. They're dead. Really nasty stuff. And it's kind of like one of the last death knells for sort of Celtic culture and Druids especially. There was a sort of a romanticizing of Druids and that sort of Celtic culture that came up in the 1800s and a little bit before that as well, where to this day we still have this pollution of what this is. And like even in your head, if you're thinking in your brain, what is a Celt, what is a Druid, you have these images that are probably not based on actual objective fact because of the retelling of this sort of history in this time of like this connection and these stories which we have no clue about. They could have just sat around these shrines and just talked about like tax or something,
if they were the legal administrators, they probably did.
20 years of just tax studies. And
I mean, who would have thought that an over-reliance on oral history and a defence policy centred around the casting of spells could be defeated by rigorous military organisation.
It is. I can't
Shocking
believe it
to me.
You are the worst.
But I have done my 23andMe DNA studies, and it actually goes to show that I'm 96% Druid.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
right.
if you cross me,
Oh, because of course you are the last of the Druids.
I don't know that I'm the last of them.
Yeah.
I'm certainly the best of them.
Ooh, the last druid.
The last
you're,
druid.
You're carrying their lore with you. And I'm so sorry to all the druids who have come before
Now, if-
that this is the vessel.
If I murder you, do I absorb your power?
No, that's not how it works.
Well,
No,
you're
no.
the last Roman, right? So this is
right.
This is a battle, and I'm a woman.
Right, one of us is getting castrated and living as a win.
Not it.
Not me.
Anyway, so Anglesey razed to the ground. Druids all but wiped out, but they couldn't build a fort there because they were
Hills.
called...
The tides.
No.
It worked once.
The hills, the tides, they were fine. They were very used to building on hills and tides. No, because there was a little young upstart in London called them back, and maybe I'll draw a line there and hand it over to I think Will. You've got something to say about
Aha, yes.
Oh, what a transition.
this lucky upstart.
Did we just segue effectively?
No, we'll change everything you were going to talk about and talk about China instead.
So that is extraordinarily useful context for my story. Wow.
You're welcome.
We're becoming worryingly competent.
Oh, no.
I mean, a broken clock, etc.
Exactly, yeah, that is basically what's happening here. So my three words were Romani ite domum, which is a quote from Monty Python, Romans Go Home. It is the corrected
scene of
Latin
the
that John Cleese...
painting on
Yes.
the walls.
Oh,
That is the
yes.
funniest
That's so
thing.
After John Cleese has corrected the Latin,
Yeah.
this is what it should be. And Romans Go Home was very much the sentiment at the time amongst those people living in Britannia.
Well, the Romans didn't want to go home because there was a greater than average chance they'd be murdered by Nero if they did.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
So this week I'm going to talk about Boudica, the ancient British leader, and specifically about the revolt that she led in the year 61 against the Roman occupiers who dared to set foot on British soil and bring us trade and improved infrastructure. So let's set the scene a bit. So in the year 60, the year before, it's now been 17 years since the Romans landed in Britain, and they'd stuck around ever since. And that was the second invasion attempt. So the previous Roman rulers of Gaul had attempted small-scale invasions to try and expand their territory into a united Norman republic. Notably, Julius Caesar in 55 BCE had a little attempt and then got kicked out very, very quickly. So this is more than 100 years later. And the most recent attempt has been successful, and the invasion has stuck, and the Romans are clearly not going anywhere. And one of the first large tribes that the Romans encountered, were the Iceni of East Anglia. And the Iceni had basically seen the writing on the wall and knew that they couldn't resist Rome's power.
They had Iceni, the writing on the wall.
Nice.
Yeah.
And they struck a deal, and the king of the Iceni was this guy called Prasutagus, and he had accepted that they needed to become a Roman client state otherwise there'd just be trouble. And then, like so much in history, everything starts to go wrong when the guy dies, and there's some dodgy succession planning that is not, shall we say, to everyone's liking. So there had been this deal to pass the lands to Rome after this guy's death, but instead he passed them both to Rome and to his daughters.
You can't, you can't do that.
You know what he needed?
Any druid worth his salt will know.
He needed a legal scholar.
And the hope was that this would be a compromise that the Romans could deal with and would secure the security of his family. But nope. So unfortunately, back on the throne in Rome, we know who was there now. It was, of course,
Nero.
a guy called Nero. And Nero and his administrators in Britannia were not super into compromise. And so
I don't know. That doesn't gel with everything I just said about him.
So the Romans dispatched a force to the Iceni capital of Ventia in modern Norfolk, and to prove their point in classic Nero-Roman fashion, they seized all the land and property that belonged to that tribe, and then to make clear who was in charge, they publicly beat the widow of Prasutagus. And can anyone guess the name of the widow of the deceased king?
Jane.
Catherine Zeta-Jones.
The answer is Boudica.
Oh, Boudica. Played by Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Right.
Played by
She'd
Catherine
be great at
Zeta-Jones.
Boudica.
She's Welsh.
She's Welsh.
Yeah.
She's the wrong tribe. We need someone from Norfolk. And then
I can't think of anyone.
and then appallingly, the Roman soldiers then made a point of raping the daughters who the lands had been left with. So this is like both obviously absolutely appalling, but they were the people who are going to inherit the whole of that tribe. So you obviously just the most appalling response to that, and they effectively then dismantled the whole of the Iceni ruling class. And a quote from Boudica at the time after the Romans left is as follows. She's then after the Romans left the tribe, she stood up and, clutching a spear, she said, "You have learned from experience how different freedom feels from slavery. Now that you have tried both, you must know how grave a mistake it is to accept an imported despotism over your ancestral ways of liberty." And
it's not very pithy, but it is very stirring.
It is good. Yeah, it's good.
Sorry.
I could see that being, on a picture of like a black and white field on a Google search.
Yeah, it'd be hard to
Next
get
was
it
like
as a
live, laugh,
tattoo,
love.
though. It'd be like a paragraph on your
Yeah.
On your-
I might get that.
scapula.
I'd do it. I'd let you guys tattoo me.
Okay, stop the recording.
I think she didn't have much time to work on the speech between the deaths of
beatings.
everyone. And
Yeah.
Well, words matter.
So she was described as tall, fierce, and with a harsh voice. And I think, given what she's been through, it's no surprise she was a bit harsh.
Yeah.
So
It's just another way of calling her shrill. Oh,
Right, exactly.
Great. Way to go, historians.
Isn't
You've done
isn't
it.
that just the Norfolk accent in general?
No, let's not do that. Okay. So Boudica then raised an army and began an open revolt against the Romans to try and push them out of Britannia.
What's a closed revolt?
I was just thinking that.
What is
you
a
never
closed
hear
revolt?
it.
Is that
I
when
guess
you
that'd
sort of
be like-
mutter under your breath?
Or sort of
You argue-
subterfuge.
You argue with them in the shower.
Next time I see him,
Yeah,
I'm going to
yeah.
give him a piece of my mind. Once I get my tattoo removed.
It's a very good point. Sorry, it's redundant. She began a revolt.
Words matter.
And interestingly, the tribes at the time in Britannia were very much motivated and kind of inspired by Arminius, who had pushed the Romans out of Germany about 50 years earlier, so strong cultural connections. And the revolt began to get some real momentum, and they were joined by neighbouring tribes, some openly and some secretly sending people to join. And it's really hard to work out exactly how big the army got, because these things are always exaggerated, but there were probably at least 100,000, which is a huge force.
Wow,
huge
geez.
force for the time. And
There aren't that many people in Norfolk now.
Yeah.
No comment. And some reports make the number sort of about twice that, which is probably unlikely. But anyway, the point was it was a really big and genuinely challenging number of people who were standing up against Roman rule. And so they set off to attack all the major Roman cities that they could, basically. So they went first to Camulodunum, which is in modern Colchester, and then to Londinium, and then to the city of Verulamium in modern St Albans. And they were absolutely brutal. And anyone from those cities who hadn't fled before they arrived was just killed.
Wow.
Sorry,
Including-
what is modern Londinium? Is that Berwick upon Tweed?
That is the modern city of Copenhagen. They hopped on some ships.
Yeah,
Popped over.
flat bottom boats.
Yes, Londinium's in. Yes, okay. And the Romans knew they had to do something about this, because obviously it was a huge challenge. They had to defeat the army at some point. But the main Roman force was, of course, off campaigning in Mona, in Anglesey, trying to defeat the Druids, as we've just heard about. And so, and the main governor was there, and that was where the bulk of the force was. And so, that is a huge distance, even with their big straight Roman roads, to try and get back to that main force, back to a place
Yeah,
where
the
they could intervene.
M4 was an absolute mess.
Yeah,
then.
it's a nightmare at rush hour, so
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
just going to get bogged down.
But they did actually. I think it's the A5 is now in the UK is the ancient Roman road of Watling Street, which goes all the way up to Chester. So that was the one they came down.
That's pretty cool.
And the Romans struggled also to field a force that was larger than about 10,000 sort of fully trained soldiers.
Against 100,000
Exactly.
Iceni.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it wasn't helped at all by the fact that the Roman ruler in what's modern Devon, so southwest England, a guy called Paeonius Postumus, was a guy who wasn't really up for fighting and refused to send his troops to help because he was so pessimistic about the whole situation.
More like Paeonius Pessimistius.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And anyway, eventually the two armies did meet, and again the exact numbers are hard to come by, but the Romans were almost certainly outnumbered by at least about 8-1, so it was properly a difficult situation for them. But of course the Romans had exceptional training, as we've just discussed, and were fighting as a proper single professional unit, while the Brits were basically just a big gang of
Gaggle.
disorganized hooligans with spears and the occasional chariot.
But they had moxie.
Yeah.
They had moxie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, they had...
Who's Moxie?
It was a drug distilled from the peats, the bogs around Norfolk. I don't know anything about Norfolk, actually.
It's a beautiful place. It is. I'm gonna.
I feel like you've never been. Have you ever been to Norfolk?
I've never been.
That's coming through. Yeah.
I'm going to stand up for the people of Norfolk here. You've been much maligning them again and again.
I know.
It's
I'm so sorry. I literally know nothing about your fine land.
That's gorgeous.
Outrageous. So, despite Boudica's best efforts to rally that mass of troops, the Romans, as they tend to do very often, they picked the perfect ground. They fought a tip-top excellent battle and charged the Brits at the right moment, and suddenly panic set in and the Britain's line began to fold, and then they began to be routed, and the day was, against quite considerable odds, just an overwhelming Roman victory. And so that army was scattered, and poor old Boudica had to go back to Norfolk and killed herself with poison sometime later.
Oh, Jesus.
But she'd had a jolly good try.
She did. You know, she had a go of it.
Yeah, that's what matters, I think, in the end.
And she's kind of regarded as the first British ruler. There's a mythos of her that is like,
Yeah, she's a British resistance figure against foreign
yeah.
occupation, which of course is like hugely romantic.
Yeah. But so how are you reconciling the two halves of yourself now? Because you love a British resistance fighter, but you also love a Roman.
Well, I have this concept. So this is pre-Britain for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Then I have an idea of proto-Britain emerging in about like the 800s, and everything after that I feel enormous affinity.
Okay.
800s, that late?
Yeah.
So in this fight, you are solidly Team Roman.
I'm just in favour of like the most effective and organised force.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I just wanted to clarify that because, listeners will have questions about your loyalty.
That's true. There you have it. Boudica's revolt.
There we go. Wow. A somewhat coordinated tour of things happening in the year 61.
Yeah, definitely. And I know what I'm getting you for your birthday, which is a bus ticket to Norfolk.
A bus ticket. Yeah. Oh, thanks for splashing out for the luxury.
Well, I mean, that way you can really take in the beautiful scenery of the hills and dales that I think they might have.
Yeah, the Norfolk Dales.
The Norfolk Dales. I don't know. They've got a cathedral, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
A beach, a couple of beaches.
I love a cathedral.
Probably
I mean, all the way around the outside is beach, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's basically surrounded by beach. It's mostly beach.
Well, okay, if you are in Norfolk or just have strong opinions about it, please email us because I clearly need to learn.
Do you know who's in Norfolk? Will and Kate.
Yeah, they do.
Sandringham.
I did know that they lived there.
So Will and Kate, please write in. Tell us how beautiful it is there.
Once
Invite
again,
us around.
Will and Kate, please email us.
Please email us back. Thanks for joining us. That's everything you'd ever need to know about the year 61.
So, all that's left is for Will to please boot up the random number generator.
No problem. I am booting it up as we speak. Casting my spell over it.
I am being defeated by the superior military might.
And the year for next week is... Oh, what's this?
Oh dear.
A piece of paper is being printed out.
The ticker tape, the infamous ticker tape.
Oh, yes, the ticker tape.
It's a really long one.
Extremely long.
Keeps coming.
I'll just tear it off.
Read it bit by bit.
Let me pass it over. Let me pass it over to Anna to read out.
Okay, we have a message from our newest board member, Patrick.
Oh, Patrick.
Oh,
Gentleman and a scholar.
Yeah, it's great.
Not to be confused with the other Patrick who we've spoken about before.
This is a separate, second, different Patrick.
He's a
very funny man.
A maker of tarts and a breaker of hearts. And that's...
Oh, by the way, if you're not called Patrick, do not sign up to our Patreon.
No. Please do sign up. Well, we need them to sign up to our Patreon.
Also visit our website, onlypats.com. Patrick has exercised his divine right as a board member.
Okay.
That's right.
And has hijacked the random number generator.
I'm going to change my opinion on Patrick very quickly if it's a bad year.
Well, it's a strange year.
Okay.
937.
All right. Okay.
937.
AD?
AD.
Okay, good.
Yes, no, he's not torturing us.
Okay, good.
And helpfully, because this is, I would say, an unusual request, he's given us some context. I'd like to put forward 937 AD. Hopefully Will appreciate it. Patrick, we don't appreciate that sort of favoritism here at the Randomly Generated History Club.
I appreciate it.
And Patrick says, quite a significant event happened on the Wirral. The birthplace of England, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, Irish, Scots, the Welsh, all with a great view of Liverpool. This is the dream.
Will does like this.
Will is he's gleeful. Patrick, you have elated him.
So much glee.
What's a Wirral and why was things happening on it?
I'll tell you next week.
Okay. Is it like some sort of a rodent?
Outrageous.
All right, Wirrals, we'll see you next week for 937.
Thanks, Patrick.
Bye.
Bye.